Hello and welcome to the Michigan and Trumbull podcast. I'm Alex Freeman, joined as always by Luke Jaconis. Luke, we'll get into how things are going for the Tigers, but how are things with you?
Things are doing great. Things are going great. Already off to a hot start here. Mixing up doing and going. It's been a Monday, but we're doing great here, and we're gonna purge on ahead. Two thumbs way up. How are you?
I'm also doing great. Despite it not being a victory Monday for either of our football teams.
No.
That's okay. The NFL season with 17 games, I feel like I bounce back from a loss with more efficiency than I do like a Tigers losing streak.
Yeah, that's interesting because you could kind of go either way with it, right?
Mhm.
I almost feel like if when the Bears lose, I'm not happy about it, but knowing that there's the amount of time that you kind of have to think about it and stew about it, whereas a baseball game, winning really solves everything in baseball. You could lose three in a row, but then if you win three in a row, it's kind of like, oh yeah, I guess we had that 3-game losing streak a couple of days ago. Whereas football, you kind of can stew on it for a week. So I could honestly see, I'd be curious to see how most people react. Because while I was not very happy overall with the Bears' performance last evening on Sunday Night Football, I woke up this morning, was venting to myself and in my brain for the first hour. And then I was like, all right, well, now it's time to go to work. And then here we are at the end of the day. And I'm like, all right, you know what? Looking back on it, 1-1, lost to the Texans, held one of the best offenses in the AFC to not even 19 points, not even 20 points. I'll take it. Could have been a hell of a lot worse. Could have been a hell of a lot better, but it is what it is. Yeah, I think I definitely struggle more with the baseball losses because they're just every day they can kick you in the nuts. Especially if things are going bad, they go really bad. Football, at least you have that week of buffer time to kind of get over it.
Yeah, and you have that moment of okay, did the team, what were the positives that we can take away from the team for the week? They're going to go improve on things next week. Any given Sunday, it's a different day. Similarly, the Lions, disappointing and not the expected result to lose to the Buccaneers at home. But we're a playoff team last year. By all measures on paper, they got better. Similar to the Lions, they, kept their core together. We'll probably see them again in the playoffs, and it's hard to beat a team twice in a season. So honestly, I'll take the loss to the Buccaneers now so that we can beat them in January.
Yeah. I've also been very surprised, and I'm going to call out, I guess, not so much Tigers Twitter, but just Detroit sports Twitter. A lot of people calling for Jared Goff's head. And folks, it's a bad look. As someone who is a fan of a team that has never once had a proper quarterback in the history of their organization and the history of their franchise, I'm not saying, Jared Goff is going to be the next Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Joe Montana. But I mean, the man took you to, the NFC Championship just earlier this year. So, I was surprised. A lot of people calling for Goff's head. Definitely not a great game. I think the Lions should have won that game. But what I really respect the hell out of the Lions, I really, really do, is Dan Campbell's coaching. And I watched some of his post game and just watching him take accountability. I really think speaks volumes to the kind of organization. Again, I have no beef with the Lions. Yeah, they're in the same division as the Bears. Yes, when the Bears play the Lions, I root for the Bears to win. But as long as it's not the Packers and as long as it's not really Minnesota, I have no beef. I almost feel like I always say the extended family member of the Detroit sports family. So I have no beef with the Lions, and I think they're a hell of a team. They're going to be good not only for this season, but seasons to come. And if you're calling for Jared Goff to pack his bags and go elsewhere, maybe look in the mirror a little bit. It could be a hell of a lot worse. You could be a Panthers fan. Yikes.
I think what a lot of those fans are forgetting is, and I don't have the statistics in front of me. I don't have the numbers, but I also Jared Goff also started slow last year, and then played back into shape. And I think part of that is that his reps particularly limited in preseason. And so in a lot of ways, this is he's played 2 competitive games of football
Mm-hmm.
since the fall or since the winter.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's gonna take a second for him to get kind of back into the rhythm. Is that a full excuse? No, because there's 17 games in the season. You should be ready for all of them.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, like they were
Yeah.
also in a position to win. They were in positions to win the game, and this time he didn't lead the game-winning drive. It's
Yeah.
fine.
I think that's why I'm a little bit more at ease going back to the Bears loss too. They were in multiple positions to win that game on Sunday Night Football. The Bears have a long, treasured track record of just completely crapping their pants, not only on primetime games, but in particular on Sunday Night Football games. So the
Mhm.
fact that they held the Texans to 19 points and they were pretty much in that game for all 4 quarters, all it took was really one good offensive drive. But while some people are concerned about Jared Goff, I am smashing the panic button on the Bears' offensive line because it is non-existent.
Yeah.
It is. I will say this real quick, then we can actually get to baseball. And I know this is more of a Detroit Tigers podcast than a Chicago Bears podcast, but if I can vent for 30 seconds, every year with the Bears' offensive line, like the season ends from the year before, and I'm like, all right, you know what? This offseason, they'll go out and get a couple of pieces, and it'll be a little bit better
Mhm.
than last year. Like, not a ton, but a little bit. And then I'm always amazed at how much it's regressed even in just a couple of months. Now, granted, this is game 2 of 17, but not good. Not good at all. But again, where I can be positive about the Bears, their defense is top notch. So great defense, very questionable offense. Chicago Bears football.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that, and we'll probably touch on this later in the conversation, but I think that going into the offseason, right, for these Detroit Tigers, one thing we should talk about is what does this mean for how we hope the offseason is approached, this run that the Detroit Tigers are on. Because let's set this up correctly. On July 4th of this year, the Detroit Tigers went 9 games under 500. Since then, 38-25, making them the best team in the American League since July 4th. The Detroit Tigers have been the best team in the American League since July 4th. And here we sit, as we record, 2.5 games behind the Twins for the final wildcard spot. Tigers about to take on the Royals in a series, who sit 5 games up on the Tigers in terms of a wild card spot, if I have mathed that correctly. And the Twins are going to take on the Guardians. So we get some interdivisional fighting about to happen, which could ultimately, I think it's a great series to put themselves into a great spot if they can take 2 of 3 from the Royals, which I think is like kind of my big must do. Obviously hope that they sweep, because there's only so many 2-for-1s you can do with 12 games left in the season. Luke, your initial thoughts on this kind of transformation of the team from where we were in on July 4th.
I'm amazed, to be quite frank. I don't say that sarcastically. I'm amazed, borderline jaw dropped. I don't even know where to begin. Because, forget even July 4th. We thought after the trade deadline, I mean, we all were saying it, but I will raise my hand and wear the cone of shame. We were all saying that this second half may be kind of brutal.
Mm-hmm.
I was calling it, I thought it was going to be barbaric. They had no pitching. Their lineup was decimated with injuries. Spencer Torkelson was, obviously in AAA at the time. Parker Meadows, I think, was still in AAA at the time. Jack Flaherty had just been traded. And realistically, we all looked at it and was like, how the hell is this going to work? They've got 2 starting pitchers. Everyone else is on the IL. How are they going to do bullpen games 3 out of 5 days and expect to be a competitive team? And sometimes crazy just works, because what we have seen from this team I mean, yeah, you said since July 4th being the best team in the American League, but realistically, since the beginning of August up until this
Mhm.
point, it's remarkable. There's so much to dissect with it, but the first two things I have to say off the top, I'm going to give the coaches some love. AJ Hinch, um, I'm saying this once again. I have always liked AJ Hinch. My one complaint with him all the years, I wish he'd be a little bit more passionate. Wish sometimes he would emote a little bit more. Sometimes I do feel he falls victim to kind of keeping quiet when I wish he'd kind of bark it up a little bit, but to each their own. Um, but what AJ Hinch has done, not only with this pitching staff and the managing of these guys, and they really have bullpen days. Yes, they've done those, but they've really kind of
Mhm.
done something new in the sense that they have these openers who go out there like Bo Bursky pitches an inning, maybe an inning and a third, and then they bring in a guy like Brant Hurter or Ty Madden to come and just
Mhm.
shut down teams for 4 or 5 innings. I mean, what Brant Hurter did the other night against the Baltimore Orioles was incredible. I mean, all this pitching, maybe outside of one of two guys, looking at you, Kenta Maeda, has been pretty top notch. Side note, I think it's been a while since we last recorded our episode, at least a month. Joey Wentz is no longer a Detroit Tiger. Hallelujah. Sorry, Joey. Not going to miss you. Wish you the best of luck. Let's move on. But not yeah, AJ Hinch, what he's done with this pitching and how he's managed it, incredible. What he's doing with this lineup, the moves he's pulling at almost the perfect times, it feels like, incredible. I mean, he's great. He truly is great. And I get frustrated every now and again, like I said, sometimes with his lack of emotion. But other than that, probably the best solid in terms of manager we've had since Jim Leland.
Mhm.
So it's been remarkable. No disrespect to Ron Gardenhire, was a big fan of him, but he was just really given a pretty shit product to try to work with. But AJ's been great, and then of course who I'm going to say next for coaches, Chris Fetter. And I tweeted it out the other night, and I mean it though. I'm not being sarcastic. The minute you get done extending Tarek Skubal this offseason, which they should do, you better have a big contract with a lot of zeros lined up for Chris Fetter, because what Chris Fetter, Robin Lund, Juan Nieves, all these pitching coaches have done, not only this season, but these recent seasons,
Mhm.
they are revolutionizing what it means to be a pitcher in the major leagues again. I mean, they are great. Detroit is becoming a pitching factory, almost a la like the Tampa Bay Rays, and it is incredible to see before our eyes. I'm so impressed with those two gentlemen, AJ and Chris Fetter, and then obviously all the other pitching coaches who have just they work so well together. It is imperative that we keep Chris Fetter around. I don't think
Yeah.
people quite understand if this man were to leave, which I think word is getting around that this guy is a dynamite coach. I think the day Chris Fetter leaves, this team takes a big hit, a big hit. So Scott Harris, Chris Ilitch, whatever we got to do to keep Chris here and happy, let's do it. Chris Fetter has been phenomenal. We can go in more to kind of players who I think have helped kind of turn this around, but kind of what do you think about that?
Yeah, while we're on the coaching staff, I think what this
Yeah.
is speaking to for me is that we're finally starting to see the fruits of a culture shift under AJ Hinch that we were hoping to see, probably much earlier in his tenure here. But finally, it does. We've talked about it a lot. That a very typical kind of Tigers thing is that they suck at the beginning of the season, then they kind of figure it out by the end of the year, and go on kind of a weird fluky run, and then maybe kind of make it a little bit interesting. But they're not ever really back in it, and then we just go through the cycle again and again. But what has felt different about this is that the wins don't feel fluky, and the guys feel legitimately like they are competing to to get to the wild card, and that like they belong there, and so that they feel like they believe that the race to the wild card is possible, and it gives it a whole different sense, which I think has been something that has been missing um in the past few seasons, is that like, oh yeah, like it's getting a little bit interesting, but like, do these guys actually believe that they're going to catch somebody and make it into the wild card? Like, no, they're just having a good time. They're like actually letting it loose. And now they're letting it loose while being competitive, while making this run. I feel like they are actually focused on sweeping the Kansas City Royals in the next 3 days, to put maximum pressure on the Twins as they face the Guardians. And I can't believe I have to cheer for the Guardians tonight, but I will be. And I just feel like that is the big thing that hopefully ultimately leads to not only the Skubal extension, not only a Fedor extension, but an actual active off season in free agency to add some of the star pieces that are currently still missing from the roster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, make no mistake about it. That's a good transition, because I do before we wrap this up, I want to talk about players who I feel specifically kind of helped be at the front lines of turning this thing around. But before we get to that, I want to kind of keep it on the off-season narrative for a second. Make no mistake about it. What the Tigers are doing right now is a blast. It's probably some of the most fun we've had watching Tigers baseball since 2014. They have, for the first time in 8 seasons, a fairly legitimate chance at seeing postseason baseball. And I think you can just tell how deprived and how starved this fan base is, that the people are coming out. They're coming out. Now, I did see some people being like, why isn't Comerica more packed? This is wrong. More fans should be there in attendance. We got to show up. Here's the thing. While I understand that, I will say this team has been bad for many years. Very, very bad. So I do not fault a single person who's like, oh, why? Because you're finally playing good baseball for 4 weeks. Now all of a sudden I got to give you my money. I get it. So if you're a fan who is still on the fence about tuning into the games, being there in person and spending your hard-earned dollars, you do what's best for you. What makes most financial sense for you. You know, I've wavered at times myself, being able to watch, not want to watch. Mm-hmm. I mean, 3 months ago, this team was unwatchable. And now what they're doing really is incredible. It really is incredible. But I thought that was worth mentioning. Fan how you want to fan of this. Enjoy the ride if you want to enjoy the ride. If you think it's a fluke, you think it's a fluke. To each their own. Going back to the offseason, though, as much fun as this team has been, these last couple months, and they've been a lot of fun, you cannot rest on your laurels. This is a team that can improve. I'm just going to say it. We don't have to have decisions and conversations about it today. This is a team who needs to be looking elsewhere for a first baseman. This is a team who is fairly thin at the catching position and needs to look at different moves for the catchers. This is a team who definitely wouldn't hurt if they added an outfielder with a good bat, a pitcher or two. The Tigers are a fun team to watch right now, and they very well may make it in the playoffs. They may not. Who knows? Regardless of what happens this season and how this season wraps up, there's work to be done this offseason. So get it done. That's what it comes down to. Scott Harris, I know, said he was, I think, on MLB Network the other night giving an interview, and he kind of gave a Scott Harris answer, not really leading much into what we can and cannot expect this offseason. But the fact of the matter is this: you can upgrade at first base, you can upgrade at catcher, you can upgrade at the outfield. You could probably make an argument that you could upgrade at third base, definitely at shortstop. And I get it; you don't want to block up guys, coming out from the farm. I totally get that. But this team is, if they're not. I'm not going to say they're there yet, because they still haven't really won anything, but they're very, very close. A hell of a lot closer than I thought they would have been 3 months ago. So now it's time for Chris and Scott to get together and say, let's open up the wall. What makes most sense? You got to make a big splash. You have to make a big splash in some capacity. You can't go by with just getting another waiver wire pickup this offseason. Like, yeah, we think this guy, we might be able to mold him into something. And if they can, that's great, because that has happened with a guy like an Andy Ibanez, a Tyler Holton. Those guys have been really solid for the Tigers, especially Holton. Probably the best relief pitcher, if not in all of baseball, at least a top 3 or 5. The guy's lights out. But it is time this offseason to make some moves. And I will say this, and I'll kick it back to you. We've said a lot, baseball is a game of what have you done for me lately? And in recent years, when the Tigers were, finishing anywhere from 10 to 15 games under 500, what kind of free agent would want to flock to Detroit? It's not a major market team. So what kind of free agent would want to come here after they just saw the Tigers barely scrape to 74 wins? Well, this offseason, unless they absolutely just crap their pants these next 2 weeks, going to finish with a plus 500 team who was
Mm-hmm.
pretty much up until the very end competing for a playoff spot. Little easier to start attracting hopefully some more star power when you can pitch them that instead of, well, yeah, we know we finished third place and barely won 70 games, but come play for us. We'd love to have you.
Okay, Luke, here's the way too early conversation on first baseman upgrades that are available.
I already know who I want. I already know who I want. I don't
here are the who you want, Luke.
Give me the polar bear. I want him.
Yeah.
I want him.
I would say here's the unrestricted free agents at first base heading into the season. We got Paul Goldschmidt, which is probably who we're going to end up with, is a 37-year-old Paul Goldschmidt. Pete Alonso, the old polar bear, Josh Bell, Christian Walker, Carlos Santana, Joey Gallo, Rowdy Tellez, and Yulieski Gurriel. I think there's Anthony Rizzo also is there with a club option, so you could theoretically work something out with the Yankees.
Isn't Ryan O'Hearn? I think he's on that list too. But is he got an option?
Yeah,
Ryan O'Hearn with the O's?
also a club option with the O's. So you could work that out. Wilmer Flores has a player option with the Giants. But yeah, I mean, I think that going after a guy like Pete Alonso is the signal that we're serious about competing for a world championship.
We just need to throw the cold water on ourselves now. I would be not only shocked, I would be floored if that actually happened. I think to me, it's a move that makes tons of sense. You don't have any big first base prospects coming up the road. I know Theron Lirianzo, who they just got from the Dodgers, is first base catcher, but he's hanging out right now, I think, in West Michigan, I want to say. It's West Michigan or Lakeland, one of the two. He's in A-ball. He's not coming up next year, the year after, most likely. So I don't know. I would love Pete Alonso here on like a 3-year deal. I'm not sure exactly what Alonso's looking for. Who knows if he even wants to, leave the Mets. They've had recent success this season. So to me, though, I would love something like that. If the O's don't plug in and go another year with O'Hearn, he's another guy at first base I'd be interested in. And I also wouldn't be surprised if the Tigers took a flyer. He's a little bit older, but on a 1-year deal. He's bounced around these last couple seasons between Minnesota, Kansas City, Pittsburgh, Carlos Santana. That's another guy as well. Definitely up there in age. You're not going to sign him to a multi-year deal, but on a 1-year kind of filler contract, I could maybe see that. But I want Pete Alonso. I really do. I know it's not going to happen. I think all Tigers fans share the same sentiment there, but I desperately want Pete Alonso. You throw Pete Alonso behind Riley Green in this lineup, that is an imposing 1-2 knockout punch. I don't think it's even remotely going to happen, but that's what I want.
And then, like, looking at the catcher class that's available, that becomes a little bit trickier when I start to look at it. Do you have catcher thoughts, Luke? Would you like me to read the unrestricted free agent list to you?
Let's do a read.
Okay, so we got James McCann, Danny Jansen, Austin Hedges, Yasmani Grandal, Kyle Higashioka, Kurt Casale, Elias Diaz, old Carson Kelly. That is your unrestricted free agent catcher list.
There's not much there. There's not a ton there that really gets me excited. There's no Pete Alonso in that group. Here's the thing with the catcher position. I really like Jake Rogers. For whatever reason, I guess I must be a masochist because I like that there's like 1 or 2 guys that are still around from like the dungeon era of this team when they like won 47 games in 2019. Like the fact that Jake Rogers played on the 2019 team, but also is still currently on the 2024 squad and may see the playoffs this year. Like I don't know why that makes me happy. Like you had to be. It's like Brandon High with the O's. Like he's been with them through the good times and the bad. So like it's just kind of, full circle. But I love Jake Rogers. And I think defensively, obviously he calls a game and I know he's really well liked in the clubhouse, but his bat really wavers from time to time. And, he's interesting because last year, I'm sure while he didn't hit for average, he did poke 20 home runs. So, I mean, the guy's got some pop in that bat. Dylan Dingler, I don't mean to pile on a guy who's barely been in the major leagues for, I think, 6 weeks, but has been awful. Absolutely terrible. Good behind the plate, calling a good game, but offensively, a guaranteed out every time. So, if the Tigers were to run it back next season with a platoon of Rogers and Dingler, I would be more willing to accept that than I think them just handing Spencer Torkelson the first baseman's job into spring training. I do not think, and I'm not trying to pick on Spencer, but I do not think he has done enough post recall to the major leagues to warrant that he is the everyday starting baseman heading into 2025. I'm not saying you dump him. I'm not saying, if you want to trade him, great. If you think you can get something for him, but the notion that the job is just his, that should be no more. He needs to earn it. You need to bring in someone to compete with him that's going to make him realize, oh shit, I don't have this thing locked up. So want to see him succeed, but what's frustrating with Spencer Torkelson is, it's just still an overwhelming amount of inconsistency. There are games where I'm like, all right, there we go, Spencer. Yes, it's finally clicking. And then he'll go on like a 4 for 67 stretch, and you're like, what are we doing here? What's happening? And that happens with everyone. I'm not just picking on him, but unfortunately for him, he was a 1-1, and he has not even remotely lived up to those expectations. He has taken a severe step back. You could make the argument this is probably his worst season thus far in the major leagues. And I just think it's not that it's time to move on, but it's definitely time to start thinking of a plan B. More than enough time to start thinking of a plan B. And I think that plan B is Pete Alonso. So let's do it.
Let's do it. Let's go get the polar bear. Yeah, so I think that, and then like looking, if you look through the starting pitcher class of like who's available, there's certainly some names that are interesting. That would be nice to see, but pitching can be such a crapshoot that it's tough to kind of make those kind of calls right now. And I do think that there are some guys in the system that do need some chances, and certainly guys that we could see that have been doing the long reliever thing right now the past few weeks that you could transition into a starter and or like keep living in this opener kind of world. Like it seems to be working.
My thoughts on the pitching, the current state of the pitching is, you said it pretty well. There are a lot of guys who have kind of been playing that opener / long reliever role that I would really like to see what they can do next year if they were given a spot. I'm going to say this right now. Obviously, Skubal's in the starting rotation. Reese Olson is in the starting rotation. A guy who 100% deserves a spot in that starting rotation next season is Kader Montero. I've been incredibly impressed with this guy. He almost reminds me a little bit of Matt Manning in 2021. Kind of got called up out of necessity and been pretty solid. Has struggled, not been perfect every outing, but I mean, for God's sakes, the man just threw a 9-inning complete game shutout against the Colorado Rockies last week. I don't care if it's the Rockies. I don't care if it's the LA Dodgers. That is a tough task to do, and he did it. And I've been very, very impressed with Kader. I think he's been really solid. But if you really look at the rotation, all the options, you've got Skubal, Olson, Montero, Mize. Matt Manning is still around. Like, I know we haven't seen him at all this season, but he's still an option. Then you've got some new young guys, Ty Madden, Brant Herder, Sawyer Gibson Long will be back next year. You're also going to have, at some point, because he got called up to AAA, probably assuming sometime next year, you're seeing Jackson Jobe in Detroit. So there are a lot of internal things. Obviously, Maeda is here on another year. I think the Tigers would be wise to go their separate ways with him this offseason. If I'm Chris Ilitch, I may not like it on the wallet, but I'm cutting ties with Maeda and Javi Baez. But that's just me. I think you see it maybe with Maeda. I don't. I have a feeling they're going to have a hard time cutting Javi loose, but I definitely feel like it's the right choice. But regardless, there are some very intriguing storylines with this team, in terms of pitching going into next year. I think you still need to go out there and probably bring in an arm or two, a la like a Jack Flaherty or Lorenzen again. And honestly, for what it's worth, I'm open to a Jack Flaherty reunion. I am. I would gladly welcome that. People are already saying that you might see Matthew Boyd back again in Detroit next season, which would be kind of funny. And if he's pitching well, sure, I don't care. Throw him out there as your fifth day starter. Right now the 1-2 in this rotation for me is Skubal and Olsen. I've been really impressed with those guys. Excited to see Reese Olsen make his return tonight against the Royals, and hopefully we'll see some positive stuff there.
Yep, couldn't have said it better myself there, Luke. And Javi Baez, the team is demonstrably better with him gone.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that contract is so hard to eat that it sort of makes sense to, if you're going to eat the money anyway, to try it again next year to see if this season that I'm certain Javi has to be embarrassed by, that try it again. Try it again next year. See if he can be who he was supposed to be. And I think that if you go out and get a guy like Pete Alonso on that roster, because you think about when Javi was at his absolute best, he had Anthony Rizzo at first base. And so if you have Pete Alonso at first base, you have Pete Alonso's bat in the order. That takes a ton of the pressure off of Javi being the guy. And clearly Javi has not been able to handle being the guy. When he arrived in Detroit, this was still Miguel Cabrera's team, even though Javi was supposed to be the bat. That kind of came into that place. He was supposed to be the defensive guy. He was supposed to be the younger version of the guy. And just could never really move into that position. So if you can bring in somebody that can be the guy while Javi can be the heel, then maybe that's the combination that works. Not that Javi was brilliant when he was in New York, but
I'm going to say this, and I can't believe I'm saying these words. I must have some form of CTE. I'm actually perfectly fine next year if the Tigers do cut ties with Javi Baez, and assuming they don't bring in some sort of replacement. I mean, if they do, it'll be someone like on a 1-year deal, like a Jose Iglesias or something along those lines, or like a Gio Urshela type deal again. But if they just cut ties with Javi, and if they don't bring in someone on kind of that short 1-year deal to kind of be like a bridge gap till they get the next person in there, and all signs are pointing in the direction that like a Kevin McGonigal, that the shortstop job will inevitably be his when he makes his way to the majors. But I'd be okay next year kind of platooning with a Trey Sweeney and Zach McKinstry. Mm-hmm. I can't believe this, but Zach McKinstry is a really fascinating player because I can think of like 2 different occasions throughout his 2 years tenure with the Tiger where like I've been like, yeah, this guy's about to probably DFA'd any second. Yeah. And then out of nowhere, like when you're like, well, this is probably the last game you'll see Zach McKinstry in a Tigers uniform, he'll go for like 3 for 4. And you'll be like, oh, okay, well, I mean, that was a nice way to end it. And then he doesn't get DFA'd. And then he's like around the next day and he has like another great game and then another great game and then another great game. Like he is like truly like a cat with 9 lives. The guy just won't go away. So, I guess I'll take a streaky Zach McKinstry over a completely healthy and playable Javi Baez, because while Javi may have him defensively, I have no hope in the bat. We've given him 3 seasons, couldn't figure it out. Eat the money, shake hands, go your separate ways. It is what it is. And Trey Sweeney, well, I don't think he is an everyday shortstop or player down the road, has been a really nice surprise from the Dodgers. And we talked about it in our last episode. Credit to where credit is due for Scott Harris. He made the Flaherty trade. And I know a lot of people right now are saying, oh, I bet the Tigers are wishing they held on Jack Flaherty. As much as I dog on Scott Harris, I don't think that. This team was not in a great position going into that trade deadline. So as much as I like to make fun of Scott Harris, I can't fault him for fielding phone calls and making some deals during the deadline, because, I mean, you're not going to hold on and try to sell some of your farm prospects when you're 5-6 under 500, and well out of the wild card and division. But yeah, speaking of players, I do think, we'd be remiss before we start kind of winding down here. A couple of players who I think really need to kind of have their moment in the sun and give them their roses are Parker Meadows. For me, is one of these guys who had a horrific start to the season went down to AAA for a good little while, has come back, and has been one of the catalysts for this team in recent weeks. I've been so impressed with Parker Meadows. He is fun. He's got an energy about himself. And I'm just going to say this without going into too much details. It is really cool to see Parker Meadows succeeding in Detroit, considering how much his brother struggled in Detroit. Yeah. I think it's a really kind of cool thing. I know that they're their own people, but just that someone with the name could kind of carry the mantle a little bit. We all had high hopes for Austin Meadows. It didn't work out, unfortunately. Parker Meadows has come onto the scene and has had some of the biggest moments in the last 2 years for the Detroit Tigers. I mean, if this thing ends up going the Tigers' way and they do find a way to sneak into the playoffs, you can guarantee with every video package that you see come postseason that Parker Meadows go-ahead grand slam with 2 outs, 2 strikes, top of the ninth in San Diego against the Padres will be at the top of that package. I mean, it was a moment unlike any other. Last year he had the big walk-off homer against the Houston Astros. So Parker Meadows for me is one of these guys who has just been electric, and I think really has been at the forefront of this kind of resurgent Tigers team. How about you? You got a player or two that you'd like to give some love to?
No, I mean, I think you took it out of my mouth with Parker Meadows, because I think that he has been in so many ways the heartbeat of this resurgence. I guess I'll take Riley Green, just because I think that he's, and some of it might be I'm just engaging with social media a little bit more, but there's I've increasingly seen videos where I feel like Riley is kind of coming into that side of himself where he feels like much more comfortable being him, and being a more fun personality. I don't know if you've seen the guys who do the heckle videos. They did one with Riley Green. He was great, getting heckled all game by those guys, responding to them, having a fun time. And I just feel like I'm seeing him have a lot more fun, a la the way it would be fun to watch Miguel Cabrera have a good time playing baseball. And I appreciate seeing that from him in this stretch.
I also, too, I think you got to give some love to a couple big names like Colt Keith, obviously, similar to Parker Meadows, really turned around his season after struggling out of the gate, has been really, really solid. Riley Green, he's our all-star. I mean, that performance he did in the Sunday finale against the O's, the 2 home runs, that's what a guy like Riley Green is supposed to be doing. And I'm not trying to take a shot at Spencer Torkelson, but that's exactly what we thought Spencer Torkelson would be doing. We essentially thought we'd have 2 of these guys, and where Spencer has kind of fallen short, Riley has gladly taken the mantle and, kind of taken the ball and run with it. I got to say this too. A couple guys that I'm really big on, one in particular is Matt Vierling. And I got to give Scott Harris his praise there. Is Matt Vierling the next starting outfielder for the next 5 years? No, but really solid, usually pretty reliable. Been great to see Jace Young, up at the major league level. I know his success has wavered. He's had a couple games where he's been really hot, some games where he's still trying to find it. Really fun to see him. Andy Ibanez mashes left-handed pitching, so he's off another Harris kind of waiver wire pickup that's been fun to watch. And a guy that I really like when he stays healthy, I think is going to be a huge, huge, huge contributor to this team is Kerry Carpenter. He's got the power. He definitely has it. Fielding sometimes still a little bit questionable, but overall, Kerry Carpenter on offense when he's healthy. And I think when we look back on the first half of the season, while we were all frustrated because this team just was mundane and just awful to watch, you do have to, I guess, kind of hindsight's 2020. A lot of these guys were on the shelf. Torkelson was in AAA, Parker Meadows was in AAA, Kerry Carpenter was hurt. You were banking on some guys who aren't even on the team anymore to kind of carry you through, and it's hard. But yeah, what I will say about this, regardless about how this season wraps up, playoffs or no playoffs, you can definitely pencil in 4 to 5 to 6 guys. You're like, yep, that guy's going to be around next season and he'll be playing this part. Yep, that guy's around next season and he'll be playing his part. And that's on the offensive side of things. I think a lot of these pitchers are coming back next year. Obviously, they're building a good rapport. They're building great chemistry in Detroit and with this baseball team. And I think it was something that was severely lacking in the beginning of this part of the year, but
Yeah.
it is alive and well. And of course, winning helps everything. Of course it does. But I just feel like there is a different type of energy surrounding this team that not only did we not see in the first half, we haven't seen hardly at all in the last 8 to 9 years. Some pockets here and there, the 2021 team showed some spurts of life. Last year's second half, as people were kind of trying to rally for Miggy's last year, saw some spurts of life. But overall, knock on wood, and I'm sure I might be kicking myself in the ass come next April and May, things are looking okay. A lot of work to be done, but things are looking okay.
I love it, Luke. We'll be back hopefully at the top of a playoff run as we go, because Luke's got a little bit of travel coming up in his life. So we definitely won't be back probably in the regular season, but we will see you come playoff time, hopefully talking about a Tigers wildcard series. So Luke, enjoy your trip.
Thank you, buddy. Tigers, just keep winning series. That's all you got to do. Go Tigers.